I'm going to show you how to do blanket stitch. I'm going to show you 3 different uses for blanket stitch, but first of all I'm just going to show you on a plain piece of fabric. The technique is the same for all of them, but you bring your needle up through the back of the fabric on the point where you're starting to work, and this is worked in a line. So if you imagine that we're stitching a line up here, where you bring your needle out is the start of that line. And then you want to put your needle in perpendicular to the way that you've brought it out and perpendicular to your line. Put the needle back in and create a small stitch coming back out so that you're in line with where your first stitch was. And you want to make sure that your thread is caught behind the needle. And what blanket stitch is it's an edging stitch. So it's really great for going around the edges of shapes. And then what I'm going to show you in a minute is applique and actually joining bits of fabric together as well. So you just keep repeating this. So little stitches that run perpendicular to your line, making sure that you catch the thread under it every time. And you can see how this starts to create the line that would edge a shape. And you want to be careful again to keep your stitches a similar size. It keeps things nice and neat and tidy. And keep working along. And then when you come to finish, you would just create a very small stitch to catch that last stitch down so that it doesn't go anywhere. I'm going to show you how blanket stitch works if you want to applique a shape on top. So in this case, I've just got a little felt tree trunk here. I'm going to pin that in place. This is a small shape, so just with one pin, but that stops it moving around while I'm trying to sew it. And then you do your blanket stitch in exactly the same way as I've just done directly onto the fabric. You want to bring your needle up on the edge of your shape, and this time around your shape is the line that you're going to be working to. I'm working this in a contrasting thread so that you can see what I'm doing, but you'd typically work this in the same colour if you want it to blend in. And I'm just going to do exactly what I did before. So you can see my line is the tree trunk and my little stitches are running at an angle to that. They're running perpendicular to the main line. And so my little stitches are what's catching the shape into place. And then my line itself is creating a nice edge to the shape. And so you can run all the way around your shape like this, and that will anchor it down really nicely. So as you can see, it's a really great way for holding down an applique shape once you've been all the way down, all the way around. You've got no loose edges on the shape, and if you imagine the stitching being in the same colour, you can see how it would work really well. And finally, you can join 2 bits of fabric using blanket stitch. So I'm just going to show you on these 2 pieces of scrap felt. Because we're using felt, which is actually quite a thick fabric, I'm going to knot the end of my thread because I'm then able to keep it hidden within the depth of the fabric. So I can just tuck that through to the wrong side of my stitching and no one will notice that it's there. And then for joining 2 bits of fabric together, you want to hold them like this. So both of the rear sides are touching one another. And then your line of the stitching, that line that we were following on the fabric, is actually just the line of where these 2 are joining. So you can start to see how my perpendicular stitches are still going to be done in exactly the same way. And so you can see, just with that little bit that I've done there, how this starts to work and how it starts to join up. So it creates something that can be opened up a little bit, not completely. You are going to have the depth of your stitching that will stop it from opening flat. But this is a really useful technique if you're creating little stuffed shapes, for example.